right! Thank God it's fantasy football season. I'm Buster Brown, and the show is called Redemption Rehab. And if you tuned in today, it's because you want to get better at one thing, and that's fantasy football. Today, we're talking about some of my top picks and some of my sleeper picks that'll help you get the job done. So let's take a look at position players, like running backs. So let's hit the chalkboard
and check out the facts.
All right, welcome back. Today we're talking running backs. Some of my top picks and some of my sleeper picks that you should be considered drafting in the upcoming 2019 Fantasy League drafts. But before we get into that, you really need to take a look at some other videos I've previously made. One of them is how to draft running backs. The second video you should be watching is running back draft strategies. Knowing who the top picks and sleeper picks are important, but how to utilize them in a draft is very important also. So make sure you catch up on those other videos. But as far as today goes, we're here to give you some important information on running backs. So let's go over and check out fantasyfootballcalculator.com and see what they have to offer. Okay, here we are on Fantasy Football Calculator's draft board. To get to it, I just punched in my league format and I went to the display column in the top right hand corner and hit draft board. And this is what brought up. So, first thing we're going to do is look at some of my top picks. Clearly in the first round, as you can see over here, a lot of good running backs are going. Saquon Barkley, Alvin Kamara, Christian McCaffrey, Ezekiel Elliott. At the time of this recording, he hasn't reported to camp, so he is falling down the draft board, and it'd be a good pickup for you guys. Just make sure you get his handcuff later in the draft. I'm not going to suggest David Johnson because, frankly, he hasn't played well, and he's on a team with a poor offensive line and question marks at coaching and quarterback. Le'Veon Bell, I really can't suggest you take him either. I'm not going to put him in one of my top picks. He hasn't played in a year. He's also on a team with a questionable offensive line and a coach that may make him timeshare the backfield with other running backs. So I can't. I do definitely like James Conner. I do like Nick Chubb. I can highly suggest Dalvin Cook. And I also like Damian Williams in the first two rounds. When it comes to round 3, there's a lot of question marks at all these guys, whether it's Kerryon Johnson, Leonard Fournette, Devontae Freeman, Aaron Jones, Chris Carson. That's all too rich for my blood. I won't do it. When it comes to the two rookies, Josh Jacobs and David Montgomery, if they fall to the 4th or 5th round, I'm definitely hopping on board, but I'm not doing it in the 3rd round like they have suggested here. Those are some of my top picks, Tier 1 and Tier 2 running backs. Let's look at some of my Tier 3 running backs before we hit some of my sleeper picks that I think you should be grabbing up in your upcoming draft. Okay, I just showed you some of my Tier 1 and Tier 2 top picks. Let's take a look in round 4 at some of my Tier 3 running backs that you should consider in your upcoming draft. If you decide to take Melvin Gordon, I don't think it's a bad idea, but you should wait until round 4 or 5 because he hasn't reported to camp at this point, and you have to take his backups, Austin Eckler and Justin Jackson. So that's 3 picks, so I can't suggest you take him at all. Mark Ingram's a good running back. If you could get him at the end of the 4th round, or better yet, in the 5th round, I think he's worth the pick. So if you get Mark Ingram in the 5th round, I think that'll work. The rest of these guys, Derrick Henry, can't suggest it. Sonny Michel, I really like Sonny Michel, but you just can't trust Bill Belichick and who he's going to play on a week in and week out basis. He killed me in the playoffs years ago, and I just can't trust him. So I like Sonny Michel. If you could get him maybe at the end of the 5th round or even the beginning of the 6th round, that's where I would take him. But I can't see taking him in the 4th round. And of course, Marlon Mack, he's on a good team with a great offensive line, but they recently just lost their quarterback who retired. Philip Lindsay's going to share a backfield, so I can't suggest him. James White, again, plays for the New England Patriots. Tevin Coleman's in a crowded backfield also. If he can get him in the 6th or 7th round, I would suggest it. And Miles Sanders is a rookie. I put him in the tier 3. They have him in my tier 3. I can highly suggest you take him, but you should try to get a good value on him. Don't reach for him. If he falls to the 6th round, I would consider taking him. And the last one that I can suggest in this category is Duke Johnson. He's over here at the beginning or at the end of round 6. He should be going somewhere in round 6. Don't reach for him in round 5 or round 4. Houston doesn't have a lot of options, but I'm sure they're going to sign people maybe like Jay Ajayi or someone who gets cut from another team. So be careful not to draft him too high. So those are my tier 3 running backs that I suggest. So when I come back, we're going to show you what you should be doing if you take a tier 1 or a tier 2 running back. You should definitely be looking for their handcuff, which is a running back that's on the same team that's their backup. Handcuffs are very important. So we come back, we're going to take a look at that. Let's say you're in the 1st round and you come over here and you take Alvin Kamara. His handcuff or backup on his team is Latavius Murray. So he's down here in round 7. So I already know if I take Alvin Kamara, I'm taking Latavius Murray. Every time you take a tier 1 or a tier 2 running back, you should be taking their handcuff. Another example of a handcuff is if you take Melvin Gordon here in round 4, you should be looking for his backup, which is Austin Eckler, which as you can see is just below him, and he's in round 6. So you've already had 2 running backs on the same team by round 7. That's why you got to be careful who you draft and where their handcuff goes. That's what a handcuff is, and I more often than not, if I take a tier 1 or tier 2 running back, I also draft their handcuff. You should too. When we come back, we're going to be looking at some of my sleeper picks that you should be taking later in the draft. Okay, what I have listed here is some 4 sleeper picks that I think you should be considering. There are some handcuffs to some tier 1 and tier 2 players that you may have already drafted in some of your leagues. Over here, the first person you have is from Kansas City. His name is Darwin Thompson. He's sort of the handcuff to Damian Williams, who you can see here in round 2. If you get a chance to get Darwin Williams, probably in round 9, I would definitely consider taking him. He's an up-and-coming rookie, and he looks like he's got something to offer in the NFL. Another running back you should consider in round 10 is Jaylen Samuels right here. He's the backup to James Conner, who you may have picked in round 1. So you should have both these players. But if you don't get James Conner, I still think Jaylen Samuels has some standalone value on his own, and you should consider drafting him also. I think he's in for a pretty good year, especially if James Conner gets hurt or you drafted James Conner in the 1st round. Let's go over here to Tony Pollard. Tony Pollard is the handcuff to Ezekiel Elliott. Ezekiel Elliott isn't in camp yet, as of this recording, but when he does come into camp, I don't think you're going to see a whole lot of Tony Pollard, but he might be a good pickup if there's an issue with Ezekiel Elliott playing at all this year. So keep your eye on that. And if you do draft Ezekiel Elliott in the 1st round, you should be drafting Tony Pollard in the 10th round. The last person I want to show you is Justice Hill. He's also a rookie, and he plays for Baltimore Ravens. He's the handcuff to Mark Ingram, who you may have taken in round 4, and I suggested you take maybe in round 5, which is better value. But if you take Mark Ingram, you should make sure you get Justice Hill, because I think he has something to offer in the NFL, and you may regret not having him on your team also. When I come back, I'm going to show you some real deep sleepers and some more handcuffs that might help you win your championship this year. Okay, one of the guys I would be drafting late in the draft, if you get a chance, who's a real deep sleeper, is Mike Davis, running back for the Chicago Bears. As you can see here, I have David Montgomery marked in round 3. If you can get David Montgomery in rounds 4 or even round 5, I would highly suggest you take his handcuff, Mike Davis. He is also a good pick just as a standalone running back later in the draft. If you look down here, you also see at the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, Malcolm Brown. There are other players getting a lot more publicity on the Rams than the true handcuff to Todd Gurley. His name is Darrell Henderson. He's also a rookie, but I don't believe he's the true handcuff to Todd Gurley. I think it's Malcolm Brown. I think you want to have him late in the draft, especially if you had Todd Gurley. But if something happens to Todd Gurley, I think you can see Malcolm Brown as a good late round pick that may help you get to where you want to be in 2019. Let's take a look at my final 3 sleeper picks for 2019. Ty Montgomery, he's the handcuff to Le'Veon Bell, a first round pick in most leagues. And I highly suggest you have Ty Montgomery as his handcuff in round 15 and or as a standalone running back, especially to have on your roster in case Le'Veon Bell goes down. Nyheim Hines is the backup to Marlon Mack. Marlon Mack is going to be a 4th or 5th round pick in most leagues. Once Andrew Luck retired, it made his stock value go from a 3rd rounder to a 4th rounder, maybe even a 5th rounder, but he's still good value because they play behind a good offensive line. So if you take Marlon Mack, you should have his handcuff, Nyheim Hines. Nyheim Hines is also a good standalone running back on his own because he does catch the ball out of the backfield. And if it's late in the draft and you need a 6th running back, which I suggest in a 20-round draft, you have at least 6 running backs. He'd be a good standalone running back that might help you get through a bye week or an injury to one of your players. And the last one I want to mention, who had a good year last year, used to play for the Broncos. He finished the year with the Los Angeles Rams, is C.J. Anderson. He's the backup to Kerryon Johnson, as you can see here, who is going mostly in the 2nd round in a lot of leagues. They have him here in the 3rd round. But C.J. Anderson had a good end of last year. He catches the ball out of the backfield, and I think he's going to get a lot of goal line work in Detroit. So I would definitely be considering taking C.J. Anderson late in the draft, especially as a handcuff to Kerryon Johnson. In summary, whenever you draft a tier 1 or tier 2 running back, you should make sure you get their handcuff later in the draft. Also, when you get a chance, you should go back and look at my other videos that I've done on running backs, like running back draft strategies, and the other video, how to draft running backs. Those will give you more insight on what it means to draft a running back in 2019. I'm Buster Brown, the show's Redemption Rehab. Good luck.